Hey, Hockey World! It is Friday, May 23rd, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I am Eklund, and you are watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com today, coming to you live from Philadelphia, Toronto, Buffalo, and Nashville, Tennessee. I'm assuming, Pete, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, this is our guest. I'm really just thrilled. One of my favorite, I would say definitely top 5 favorite people in this entire business, Pete. You've just been so nice to me. And Pete Weber, the play-by-play and television announcer for the Nashville Predators. How you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm getting a little bit tired of having no game days. I mean, I want a game every day, if not multiples. Guys, I don't know how you are, but that's just the way I am.
So with you. I'm so with you. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, after a while, you just have to think to yourself, it's just I can't watch this much baseball. Baseball is killing me. I can't watch this baseball. It just makes me insane. But yeah. So the Preds are out early, but they haven't been without news. And What are your thoughts on everything that's gone down here? Barry Trotz, did you see this coming?
Barry was trying to prepare Crispy and me for this, I think, going down the last month. He felt it was a done deal. So in that sense, yes, we did anticipate it. In the other sense of I have not had the chance yet to talk with him as coach of the Predators, Peter Laviolette, because right away he was off to Minsk and the tournament in Belarus. We do have a sports festival in Nashville coming up next weekend. I'll be doing a sort of a roundtable discussion with him at that. So I'm very much looking forward to it. But my good friend Chuckles Caton of the Carolina Hurricanes has already told me I'm going to enjoy Peter Laviolette immensely.
Oh yeah, I liked him in Philly. He was a lot of fun in Philadelphia to cover. He's definitely I think he was different in Philly than he was in Carolina too.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see which Laviolette you get, because I did cover the Stanley Cup run in Carolina. And, of course, that was the Stanley Cup, and coaches are usually in a good mood when they're in the Stanley Cup Finals.
They should be.
They should be. Philadelphia is a whole different ball of wax, and I think that was an interesting thing for him. One of my best memories of him was I flew back after the Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup. I flew on the plane with his parents and sat in a row with them.
Okay.
They stopped in Philadelphia on the way back to New England, and they were the nicest people in the world. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be. I guess the catchword you've got to be tired of talking about is the Predators are going to finally have offense, right?
Well, granted, the players can provide it, but yeah, he's going to take a more aggressive approach, I do believe, in that. Now, Barry Trotz always liked to use an aggressive forecheck in the big games, but it seems like that was always against Detroit. So maybe it means now that we'll have an 82-game menu of this, rather than just held down to those 8 games or maybe another 8 against the Blackhawks.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, obviously it's a fun town to if you ever get a chance. I always tell people you have to go to Nashville to see a game. I've tried to go every year. I didn't go this year or last year, which is really it's been too long now because of the lockout last year. But yeah, it's the greatest place to watch a game. Mike, you had a question for Pete.
Pete, with Peter Laviolette, there's going to be more of a focus on generating offense. The Predators have a great goaltender in Pekka Rinne. They have a top flight defensive core led by Shea Weber and Yossi and Seth Jones. But they traded David Legwand at the trade deadline, and I think that the general consensus out there is that they need to add forwards. How aggressive do you think the ownership and management of the Preds will be in free agency? I've heard names like Paul Stastny mentioned. How aggressive do you think they'll be?
And other people have been tweeting me. They have heard, that a certain captain of the Ottawa Senators might be coming to Nashville. And so look at Jason Spezza, perhaps. I got to tell you, I think that the price tag off that first round even playoff loss to the Wild for Stastny is going to be way up there. I would imagine virtually anybody who needs help up front is going to be pursuing him. So since the marvel of all this, and I'm not trying to talk around all this, but the marvel of this, the smartest person I think ever in sports wasn't trained in sports. That was Marvin Miller. And he always thought that for free agency, the only way to keep things up was to have a restricted pool of those available. So that's what's really helping in this, and that's what is always going to push the price up. And the Predators have spent most of the, I'm not going to say most of it, but the heavier percentage of the out-of-pocket money for Shea Weber's deal that they matched from the Flyers already, so that may give them a little bit more room coming in here. And I know the reason David Legwand was traded, they did not think they were going to be able to, after having preliminary talks, the Predators thought they were going to be able to meet his contract demands for what in that case would have been an extension. So yes, time to be out there and search, and then hope that the 420 goal scorers they had this year can have some company this next year. And how there were 420 goal scorers on this team, the way things were going in January, I have no idea.
I'm so with you, Mike.
No, I don't want to draw the ire of Eck, because every time I suggest that the Predators trade Shea Weber, he's threatened to cut me off the webcast. But they do have a lot of depth on the blue line, and not Shea Weber, but guys like Jones or Yossi or Ryan Ellis. Do you think the possibility is there that they may trade one of those players to get a young forward or somebody they can build around up front?
I think they would hate to trade. I'll ask these individually, or answer these individually. They would hate to trade Roman Yossi, because now they have a player who's been established as complementary to Shea Weber. Ryan Jones, excuse me. Seth Jones, I don't think is going to be a factor to be traded. They were so happy they were able to get him. They will keep him. Now you come to somebody who had a breakthrough this year, and I think the second half of the year in particular, Ryan Ellis, it finally looked like he felt that he belonged. He struggled with that for a bit, to be certain, and I think every defenseman coming into the league does. But I think they like what they have there. Maybe if they trade somebody else, that would be possible. I don't have insight to David Poyle's cell phone records, but the one thing we do know, he doesn't have Ryan Parent to trade again. So that was something that worked in the past. But yeah, it's just logical to think in that fashion, to take something where you have a strength to try to exchange those assets for something up front.
It's interesting because, and you're funny with Parent, and then of course Klein as well, because what you get these Predators, the defensemen who are rumored to be traded a good 2 years before they actually end up being traded. It feels like Parent was rumored for a while, Klein was rumored forever. And obviously, the defense and the defense there has always been renowned.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun year, and obviously, in my opinion, they did pretty darn well considering the Pecorine situation. I thought that is a pretty devastating blow.
How did they go 500?
Yeah.
In the 51 games he missed? I have no idea, but 21-9 they managed, and then they end up finishing 6 games over, but still 3 points out of the playoffs, which is what everybody shoots for, and wanting that made it very, very difficult. Hey, Kevin Klein, by the way, just a note on him.
Yeah.
If he reaches the Stanley Cup final, he will tie previous Predators traded in season for doing this. Greg DeVries, the first year, was able to make the finals, and then, or the second year, and then he could actually, of course, the goal would be to hoist Lord Stanley. There has been one Predator traded in season, and it was kind of a strange deal of a season for him, but the try to pronounce out of Neckar, Netzcash, Stan Netzcash, was here in 2004, but finished the season with the Lightning and was part of that Cup-winning team.
That's an excellent name. Wow, that's a
Stanislav Netzcash.
Yes.
That's a great name. Wow.
I think Mike, he's from Depew, New York, isn't he?
Oh man, well that's good stuff. Well, let's move on to the other rest of the league.
Yeah.
Pete, and thank you for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it.
This is fun.
I know Preds fans are email. I've already gotten about 7 emails. Pete's on the show, and so people are fired up. All right, Josh. I got to get into this with you for a second because we got to talk about the game last night. I have shown myself to be not the biggest Michel Therrien fan. And last night was no exception. But what were your thoughts on last night, Josh?
Yeah, well, before we get into that, I have one other question for Pete, if it's okay.
Sure.
Pete, obviously the Predators dealing David Legwand at the deadline. That's a huge role to fill. Who can you see the Predators going after to fill that role this year? I mean, we've talked about guys available, rumors like San Jose maybe blowing things up there. Spezza, as you mentioned before. Other guys out there, Stastny you mentioned as well. Is there a guy that you think the Predators should target to bring in to fill the role of David Legwand?
Well, I would love to, if they could have in the past, I was going to take Dean Lombardi out for a long night and see if the Predators could trade their number 11 for his number 11.
Oh, yeah.
Get on Jay Kopitar. But I just don't think that was work out. I know that they've had extensive meetings this last week or so trying to figure out of course, you can't come up with one solution and hope that happens. So there are any number of those that you have to consider. But, think about 16 seasons of Predators hockey. Has there ever truly been a number one center iceman here? And certainly nobody in the Kopitar range, certainly nobody along the lines of Joe Thornton, and Jonathan Taves, obviously, and so on. So they have. It was like when I was with Buffalo, and the Sabres won the Northeast Division in 1997, and everybody said, "Okay, you got a great goaltender, and you have 4 third lines." And that essentially is what the Predators have had. But the difference between those teams and the Predators, I don't really think you can say, and my apologies to Gary Galley, but I don't think you can say that the Sabres had the level of defense expertise at all that the Predators have had.
Yeah,
I think Derek Plant was a number one center, don't you, Pete?
Derek, he's my good buddy. You know what I almost wore on this show today? I have his Nippon Paper Cranes jersey that he gave me when he came back after playing in Japan. We still are in regular communication. But yeah, the number one line on that Sabres team was Barnaby on the left side, Derek Plant in the middle, and Randy Burridge with the two cadavers knee ligaments in his legs at that time, working on that.
Dead man skating, as they say.
That's right.
That guy fell off the face of the earth too, eh? Randy Burridge.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Wow. Fort Erie zone, Randy Burridge. Yes.
Fort Erie zone, and I'll tell you, nobody worked harder than he did, and he knew that he had to.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's
Tommy Washington played pretty good too with the Capitals.
Yes. Yeah. Prior to Buffalo. Yep.
That's the Sabres team that I took to a Stratomax Stanley Cup back in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but that Sabres team, they just were amazing for me. And I became a Sabres fan because we all had 4 teams in the league that I was in, and that was one of my teams. And for some reason, I took that team to a Stanley Cup.
Well, I'm still in regular contact with Rob Ray, Matt Barnaby, and all those guys back there, and Mayday as well. So that was an incredibly tight group. And I've heard Bill Clement talk about this week about the 40th anniversary of the Flyers' first Cup and how tight they were.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Brad May, my greatest story with Brad May. Real quick, I'll tell you this. This is a great one. I was in Nashville for one of the playoff games during, I think it was the Canucks series a couple years ago. When I got in trouble for tweeting out that Taylor Swift was rehearsing in the basement. Got in a lot of trouble for that. I didn't realize I wasn't allowed to say that. So anyway, I'm in the line there eating food, and I hear Brad May.
Yes, I was there.
Do you remember this story?
Yes.
And he says, "Where is that Eklund guy? When I see him, I'm going to tear him apart. I'm going to beat the hell out of that guy. I just can't. When I meet him, when I finally find out what his face looks like, oh, it was awesome. I was just.
It wasn't awesome at the time.
It wasn't for a minute, but I knew, with Pete, with you there and Crispy there, I knew that I was pretty safe and that someone had probably put him up to this. So we'll never know the real story, but yeah, that was something.
Let's try to get it, guys.
Yeah.
And that 1997 Sabres team that was famous for one thing, the fight in the second round of the playoffs between Steve Shields and Garth Snow, and I think that most Islander fans would like to requisition Steve Shields to come and beat up.
Well, I tell you, one of my friends yesterday tweeted me to ask me if I had the radio call of that. And, I still do on the hard drive here on this very same computer. Wow. I will never forget that night. Never forget it at all, especially when I look at toward the end of the video, and the aforementioned Derek Plant is there trying to act as a peacemaker after it was like Brindamore and Barnaby. The last 4 or 5 minutes were doing isometrics against each other on the inboard glass.
Yeah, I've been trying to find out for a year, because I have the video of that, Pete. I've been trying to find out for years. There's a Sabres player who's yelling and screaming right into Garth Snow's ear when that fight was going on, and I cannot figure out who it is.
Yeah, the last to join in was, well, actually, Brad May came over and was plied off. And then, of course, he was having some sort of conversation with Andrei Trefilov, the other goalie, who, of course, was ejected for skating length of the ice to join in.
Oh, that's when hockey was hockey. I'll tell you.
There you go. The fans are on their feet yelling, "Kill, kill, kill! This is hockey!"
Oh, we hated the Sabres. That was funny. We were just talking yesterday, Pete, about I think you were you still there when John LeClaire put the puck through the side of the net?
No, I was here by that time.
That's what I thought. Yeah, we were talking. I was at that game. We were talking about how in this day and age, how video replay would have found that immediately, but people were flipping out, and that turned the entire series.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
It was an amazing play. I was sitting right behind it with my parents at the time. All right, so let's get into last night for a second. Again, the Canadians are alive. Josh and I have this good battle going here. So hang on for a second, because I am not really totally into the idea of last night's fourth line. Let's talk about last night's fourth line, Josh. Briere, Vanek, and Bourque. Okay, Bourque scored 2 goals, or at least 2 goals in the Lightning series, and was a really key factor there. Vanek was really big in the Boston series, but has been, invisible in the series. And Briere has, helped them win the Boston series, and basically, is Danny Briere. Okay, he's a playoff machine. This was the fourth line last night, Josh. Okay, so that was the fourth line.
Well, let's also be honest, Eklund. Tokarski was unbelievable last night. He stepped up to the occasion, and you know what? He made me a believer. I didn't think his 5'10" frame would be able to, come up with the big saves, and he was lights out last night. That first goal that the Rangers scored, not his fault at all. No. You have the defenseman Josh Georges, who crashed into him, was actually the one that made the save, the initial save, but he was stuck in the crease and prevented Tokarski from really, being able to move around in the net and make that huge save, which ended up being a goal. But yeah, Tokarski, you got to give him credit. I was really shocked the way this kid played. He, I wasn't expecting anything what he was able to do last night. I'm watching it in awe at Toronto's #1 sports bar. They say the world, ESPN ranks it a real sports bar on the big screen, and I'm just watching this with my Coors Light in my hand, shaking my head. Are you serious? How did he say that?
I had to keep coming back to the movie Youngblood. There's still a place in this sport for middle-sized white guys, and Tokarski is my size. I'm 5'10". I'm thrilled. I'm like, this really, I don't know. He played out of his mind. Again, this is the Rangers, okay? So the Rangers are not snipers. This isn't, Ray Emery almost beat them a couple times, and he can't move side to side. So I'm not saying anything against the Rangers. And yes, I love the fact that we decided that Therrien is brilliant for this move. That also was getting me.
And Tokarski stoned St. Louis in the final, 40 seconds?
Oh, yeah. Those couple of those saves were brilliant. There were some brilliant saves. So Danny Briere playing a good 9 minutes, gets the goal with a minute left in the game, ties up. And then the Rangers tie it up. So Josh, explain to me this. Explain to me how that's your fourth line, how Proust and Weiss are elevated to the third line, and Ehlers, who can't do anything, is now their center, and Giunta, I've spent my life watching Brian Giunta here in Philly, and was a great player, but he cannot play defense anymore and has been just horrible on faceoffs, and is elevated to the second line, and yet this team wins last night.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know what Therrien's doing. It's kind of, people are shaking their head,
My theory is this.
But it's working.
Yeah, it is working.
That's the problem.
Well, let me just say this. There's a term in New York State for It's Rhino in political term for Republican in name only. This is fourth line in name only because they played over 10 minutes. They did not like play like a prototypical fourth line and play an energy role. I mean, I think what Therrien did is he made his fourth line a skill line with a guy like Briere and a guy like Vanek, and he placed them, in certain situations, and in the end, it worked. It got them the Briere go-ahead goal with a few minutes left to go in the third period, and now I know that there was a lot of criticism, and not that I want to take a task with Pierre Maguire, but they were
careful.
They were talking about Vanek being responsible for the first goal, the Hagelin goal, that Vanek didn't backcheck, and he was excoriating Vanek because of it, with hardly mentioning the fact that PK Subban gave up the puck at the blue line and was standing still when Hagelin and St. Louis were breaking the other way. I mean, come on. I mean, I realize that right now that Vanek is the kicking dummy of the media, but give me a break.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this series, Pete?
I really enjoyed it. Now, number one, I could not believe the 4 sets of eyes missed the Prust hit on Stepan last night. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the doctor's images did not miss that this morning, and now I think right now Derek's undergoing surgery for damage to his jaw.
Yep.
But that I could not believe, but I thought, and I tweeted at some point, I think in the third period, I said, is Tokarski tonight playing the role of Jonathan Quick last night? Because without Quick's great saves to keep that game 2-0, the Kings don't come back, and we're not talking about them going back to SoCal with a split in the series. Right. And I thought Tokarski performed similarly to that last night. If not, in some cases, some of those saves were just spectacular to me.
What is it, Pete, about this position, goaltender in hockey, that enables this to happen? And it doesn't feel surprising anymore when somebody does this. What is it?
And how about Canadians' rookie goaltenders who have done this before? Right. I mean, so Tokarski had, 10 games coming in or something? Yeah. Ken Dryden had 6 games when he started the playoffs in 71 and knocked out the Boston Bruins, who were the greatest accumulation of talent that hockey had seen to that point. And then there was Patrick Waugh, who came on and did it for them in 86. And repeated for them in 93. It's just been something fantastic to see. In a way, we have more goaltenders doing this, and we always think about great playoff performers out of nowhere and sometimes attach the name John Druce to that.
Right. This is John Druce.
But this is the goaltenders doing it, and it's been spectacular. Well, number one, it's the best coach position now after going years without any coaching. I mean, let's think about this. I mean, the first goaltender coach I really remember was Eddie Jacquemin in the late 70s. And then you had guys like Ed Chadwick, who came in and helped out in Buffalo, the former pro goaltender himself, Marcel Pelletier for a bit in Philadelphia, and then Bernie Parent got his coaching from Jacques Plante. But that was so overlooked. Did baseball go 80 years without pitching coaches? I don't think so.
That's an excellent point. Josh?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my mind, the Druce is on the loose. That's what they used to say.
Yeah.
In Washington, when he was, I was there. I was in Washington then. Dad was doing the announcing for the Caps, and I got to see firsthand John Druce, who really didn't play a big role that year in the regular season, but they lost. I think that was the playoffs. They lost Dino Ciccarelli, their leading scorer, and Druce just went on the loose, and everyone was talking about it. Like, who is this guy? He's got how many goals in the playoffs? 16? 15, 16? I can't even remember how many he scored, but the guy was clutch, and he reminded me a lot of, this was before Claude Lemieux was able to be clutch in the playoffs. But, put him in the same category as Claude Lemieux. Put him in the same category as Danny Briere. I actually talked to John Still. He lives up in Peterborough. I reminisce with him quite a bit about that playoff series a couple times, and it's nice to see Danny Briere continue to be that to have that playoff magic like Claude Lemieux, like John Druce had when they played.
Well, guys, you've got some great pictures going there behind you. Please excuse me. I have to go get my picture of me with Bobby Orr. Excuse me. Just
Well, I think from this point forward, we should name that when the goalie comes in, he is Tokarskiing.
No. Well,
Come on.
I mean, let's just say. Oh, here we go. Let's give the stage to Pete here with this picture before I talk.
Yep.
No, this is more like. Oh, here we go.
Let's see this.
Wow.
Very nice.
This is me with Bobby Orr in the Forum Club in Los Angeles, just after he had retired during the '79 season.
That is great.
Wow.
That is great. Wow. Jeez, that's Mr. Hockey.
Yeah. Now, you know,
In my mind.
I think Tokarski is more like Steve Penny than he is Patrick Roy or Ken Dryden. I mean, you know, not to say that
the story's still incomplete.
Right. He could still have a very decent NHL career. I don't think he's going to be a star goaltender, but we'll see. Yeah, another playoff guy. Remember Chris Kontos from the LA Kings? There's a guy. I think he scored like 9 goals in 11 games in the playoffs in the playoffs a few years back. So and it's not unprecedented that you have a guy who just finds it. I remember Brian Bellows with the Capitals when they went to the finals the one year. I mean, I think he was in Europe and he came back and he scored like crazy for the Caps the year that Ron Wilson was the coach that they went to the finals. So not unprecedented, and you know, in a small window, the Canadians could rally around Tokarski and make this series difficult. And now with Stepan out, Brassard out, Carcillo probably getting suspended for 10 games. The playing field is starting to be evened a little bit, and now, you know, the Rangers, you know, dominating the series and going to the finals is not locked in or etched in stone.
So let me tell you why that Capitals team made the finals. The one line was just absolutely incredibly dominant.
Yeah.
Craig Berube, Dale Hunter, Chris Simon. That's why that club made the finals.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Chris
Holy
Simon.
Kolchak.
As long as you don't put Ryan Holwig anywhere near Chris Simon, he's okay.
You are correct. Yes. Something about he thinks about karate all the time when he sees him.
And Chris Simon was the guy who was traded with Eric Lindros. Don't forget.
Yes. And Peter Forsberg.
Yep. Before Peter Forsberg, Simon came to the Flyers with Lindros, and it was one of those things. You know, the Flyers just had to get a goon in the deal, so they got a goon in the deal too. But
And who was the coach of the Capitals then?
Ron Wilson.
There you go.
97. Yeah.
Wow, the irony just never ends. No, that's crazy. So at some point, Pete, in the future, when you're calling a game in the playoffs and some goalie just comes off his head, starts playing out of his head, you have to use the term, he's Tokarskiing us.
Yeah, exactly. So I just don't mix it up and call him somehow Koharski, then they'll say, have another donut. But yeah.
I know. Tokarski and Koharski, someone's going to say that at some point. Yes. They have to. I mean, I agree. But so this series is now a series. We still, you know, and the funny thing is Tokarski won't even play in the finals, right? Because Carey Price will be back apparently.
That's what we're understanding, but yeah.
Right, that's what we're understanding. So
I believe he's being flown to Lourdes right now to be dipped in the healing waters.
Now let me ask you guys this question.
On that. Go ahead, Josh.
If Tokarski stands on his head the next 3 games and the Canadians pull this off, I mean, I guess you still got to go back to your number 1 guy, right? If he's healthy.
He's Carey Price. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know.
Josh, you can remember this example. In 2002 playoffs, the Leafs lost half their team. Tucker, Sundin, a couple of their defensemen, and with Alan McCauley as their number 1 center, they beat the Islanders. I think they beat the Senators and get to the conference final against the Hurricanes. And then everybody comes back after I think they won the first game of the series. Everybody comes back in game 2, and it wrecked the chemistry, and they ended up losing that series in 6 games. So I think if they keep winning, they're going to stick with Tokarski until he loses, and then if Price is healthy, they would go to him. But if they keep winning, they have to stick with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if Price comes in and he wins the nickname Civ? I mean, in the first game.
Right, exactly. I mean, now, Pete, you please see the Western Conference. Do either of these teams in the East have a shot against either of those teams in the West?
Minus any injuries, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Now, but here's the key, though. This LA series could go quite a while.
Yeah.
They could beat the living bejeebers out of each other.
Right.
And might have, and you mentioned dead men walking earlier, you know. Yeah. Who's left, so that could make things difficult. But I think as the teams stand now, no, I think it goes to the West winner.
Yeah, I think it feels like you're watching the Stanley Cup final there. That's a great series, and it really felt like a great series last game with. it must have been special for you. You also worked in LA, correct, Pete?
Yeah.
You were also,
Yeah.
So, I mean, with the Kings winning a Stanley Cup, that must have been a fun experience for you. And yeah, I guess you're rooting for them in the back of your mind, aren't you?
Not the back of my mind, right in the front.
Okay, there you
right up here. I went out for the finals and I saw games 3 and 4 there. Yeah, so I was there for those. I stayed with Bob Miller, my broadcast partner from years ago, and we still are in very regular contact. And thankfully, I have DirecTV, so I can watch the prime ticket post-game wrap-ups that they do after the playoffs, and that's been a great deal of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I finally met Bob Miller this year. It's the first time I ever met him, but great guy, wonderful. And I remember I talked to you. I sat with you out in LA. I forgot about that in the finals. So this series, I mean, this is back and forth, and this is, this is one of those interesting series to me that the Kings don't really play hockey until they have to play hockey. It feels like that's what this team's about, and usually with the Hawks, you wouldn't be able to get away with that, where you can get away with it with other teams. But how do you see this thing playing out, Pete? What's your prediction? Like, throwing it on the line, what do you think?
I think that the Blackhawks should prevail.
Yeah.
Just looking at this rationally, and keep in mind, you're talking to somebody here who got attracted to hockey by Hull, Makita, and Hall.
Right.
Back in the late 50s, early 60s, and that was my first club. And listening to Lloyd Pettit, there's a shot at a goal, or the old time great Lloyd Pettit. I can't repeat here because we have youngsters watching. But one night, and again in the playoffs with the Rangers in '71, he had Bobby Hull hitting the guess what post, what was used there with all of that. And WMAQ, carrying the Blackhawks at the time, went silent for about 8 to 10 seconds, and they came back on, excuse me, but I got so excited. That was just one of those things. The Blackhawks always have seemed to know, and they have not played extraordinarily well in these playoffs, but they have played well enough to win. And that's why this is sort of like as my broadcast partner Terry Crisp has said for years, when you watch these two teams play, it's like watching a spider do push-ups on a mirror. That's how close they are, and you're not too even if you go back to the old Marx Brothers films, where Groucho and Harpo were doing that bit mirror imaging each other. That's the way I think this goes. But I think the Blackhawks, if the edge for the Kings though has to be quick, and I'm not denigrating Corey Crawford at all. Yeah. But I just think the way Quick plays the game is fantastic.
He is. He's by far my favorite goalie to watch. His style, that save he made the other night we talked about yesterday on Seabrook. That was a cup-winning save if ever there was. I mean
my groin hurt after seeing that save.
Harbin Killebrew's been dead for a few years, but his hurt even after those splits he did the '68 All-Star game in Houston.
My favorite line was Buccigross one night on ESPN was talking about he was saying, and this guy, he's just back from a pulled groin, and this guy back from a pulled groin, this guy back from a pulled groin, and Buccigross's line was, raise your groin if it's not pulled. Oh man. So Josh, what are your thoughts here? I know that you're in the Blackhawks court as well, but do you think Quick can take this, or do you think that at the end of the day the Blackhawks take this through?
You know what? At the beginning, I thought it was going to be all Blackhawks, but you know what?
Yeah.
I think you can't count out the Kings and the way they've been playing. We talked about a few times about Jeff Carter and the way he could take over a game and lead your team to victory. And you know what? If Jeff Carter can continue to do that, I mean, obviously the Kings might be able to beat the Blackhawks. And then you look at the other guys that I've talked about before. I mean, Quick is sensational, and he can win games on his own. But then, again, Tyler Toffoli, I watched this kid all year long. I've watched him in the playoffs, and it's like he's got even a bigger step in the playoffs. And Sutter's not afraid to use him and play him a lot. And you know what? He's a great player. And then on the back end, I really like Jake Muzzin. He didn't have really big statistics this season, but he's getting the points in the playoffs. I think he's got 4 goals already, and definitely a huge compliment to Drew Doughty and Voinov as well. I think the Kings could actually end up winning this thing. And I mentioned before about how it seems like in Olympic years, the guys that are playing in the Olympics seem to be able to have that extra oomph to be able to go far and score some big goals. And it seems that way. Again, you look down the Kings roster, the Blackhawks roster, a lot of guys on Team Canada, and they're playing well. It's going to be a series that goes 7 games, but yeah, you know what? I don't know who's going to win this series, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would like to see both go 7. Like I said, I'm pulling for that. Another Butchergrass line, the hottest women in all of hockey Stanley Cup final, the Kings versus the Canadians, the hottest fan base you could find. So I'm still up for that as well. I would love to see that final. That would be an amazing final, and a great one to travel to. Mike, you had a question about on the Preds for Pete.
Pete, now, Barry Trotz apparently is the hottest commodity on the NHL coaching market right now. Heard his name mentioned in Florida, Washington, Vancouver, even the possibility of going to Pittsburgh if they do fire Bausma. Where do you think that he ends up, or do you think he even takes a job? Do you think he takes a year off? I know the heat is out there, but where do you think that he ends up?
He wants to coach. He does not want to sit back and take the position as of now unspecified within the Predators organization to stay here for a year. He wants to jump right back in. I do know he has not contacted Metallurg Magnitogorsk to try to step in and follow up Mike Keenan's Gagarin Cup win there, so he doesn't want to do that. There's many. Okay, he has a home in BC, but we've talked about the media, and I would think Vancouver's media actually might be the most stifling in the league.
Yeah.
I really feel that way.
Wow.
Washington, I think, and I believe he's been there twice now, or at least spoken seriously with them twice. The intriguing thing there is, though, does he get hired before a general manager, or is it slam dunk that Ray Shero, with whom he is quite familiar, goes in there and takes over as GM? I can see that happening, but I also think that he would be outstanding there in Raleigh with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, that makes sense too. He seems like a perfect Penguins coach to me. When I think about the Penguins, I just think about the way, it would obviously be such a strange adjustment for him from Nashville to Pittsburgh. You can't imagine two more different situations.
No, not really. Even if you think back to the really highly offensively powered teams that were here in 06 and 07. But, that would be a tremendous difference. That was the Paul Kariya time, and Paul Kariya still is the only guy who's averaged more than a point a game playing the Predators' colors. So, a large adjustment to make where, at least in theory, you have a larger margin for error.
Yeah, that's true too. That's a good point. What were your thoughts? That's a good question, Mike. I also wanted to get your thoughts on the Ray Shero, Dan Bylsma situation, because that really took us all by surprise. I'm sorry, who's? On the Dan Bylsma, Ray Shero situation.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
Okay, I don't know if you were talking to me. Okay.
Yeah,
I was very surprised, and obviously so were most of the people sending out the reports that morning that press conference coming up, hour and a half, going to announce cleaning the house. It's going to be Ray Shero and Dan Bylsma. That because Dan stays, I think makes it more questionable as to who's going to end up in there, because this could carry on for quite some time if they're going to allow the incoming general manager to make the decision as to whether Dan stays or not, though we know he'll get paid the next 2 years if they decide not to retain his services. But Ray Shero, I have a difficult time thinking about his dismissal. The club got to a pretty good point, actually hoisted the cup 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I guess it came down to what have you done for me lately. And I think wherever Ray Shero goes, success will follow him.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fine and a half. That's a real gift. He to me can name his price pretty much out there at this point. If now Jim Benning, obviously he's hired yesterday. Josh, what have you heard on this? You heard anything about Ray Shero in any of your conversations?
I have heard that Shero is the top candidate right now in Washington, and I think he's the guy that gets the job, guys, because honestly, I see the Capitals going in the direction of bringing a guy in that's got experience. Obviously, Shero's got experience. He's won a Stanley Cup with the Penguins, came close a couple other times. I think Shero's the guy. You look down the list, and the other guys are guys that really haven't had haven't been a GM in the league. There's looking down the list, that Shiro was the number one guy. And then I see Trotz then going into Washington as well from their relationship in Nashville. And, Trotz loved living in Baltimore. I knew Trotz when Dad was working for the Capitals, and Trotz was the head coach of the Baltimore Skipjacks. And he loved it out there. And I think that's the team he wants to go to. So I think it's Shiro, Trotz. That's the combo that's going to Washington.
The only thing he didn't like there, Josh, he didn't like when he had to room with Kenny Albert on the road.
That's true. That's very true.
And he didn't like the crab cakes either.
Oh, he liked those. He liked those.
Oh yeah.
I would think you would like those.
And Trotzy's good people, guys. Obviously, Mr. Weber knows him very well and got to spend 17 seasons he was the head coach of that team.
Yeah.
He's a good person, and he's a great coach, and he's not going to be on the sidelines long.
Yeah, he was of course in place as a scout the year before the team began play. I was in Southern California. We had a 25th anniversary of Bob Miller's tenure there at the Kings. So the next night I go to the Ducks game against the Blackhawks. I'm sitting next to Trotzy in the press box that night that Gary Suter almost beheads Paul Kariya.
Oh.
And whoever would have thought that then months later we'd be working together here. And then a couple years after that, he is coaching Paul Kariya.
Yeah.
And Gary Suter's nephew is sitting in the dressing room with Paul Kariya.
Oh, that's good stuff. That was definitely a Paul Kariya. The way I would love to see the Predators to get a guy like Jason Spezza. I have talked to people in Ottawa, and I've got good sources there who really tell me that there's maybe 3 teams, but what the Predators have, the Senators seem to think, at least at this point, is closer to what they're asking. We haven't yet heard the recipe. We haven't.
Yeah.
2 first-round draft picks, a defenseman, a right-handed left wing, or whatever. We haven't heard yet what Ottawa wants for this, but whatever that is, apparently the Preds have that match, and I would.
As long as it's not Mike Fisher.
Right. Yeah. That's not gonna happen, right?
Or divorce court will be soon to follow.
Yeah.
That's
like
right.
Besides Shea Weber, he's the only one that can't go anywhere. So to me, and Pekka, but I just would like to see this because the 2 times I've seen the Predators fan base the most excited were when they picked up Kariya and when they picked up Forsberg.
Yeah.
And this is a fan base that's just crying out for some star power, and Spezza's personality, I think, would fit there really well, Pete.
I do too. Now, I got to reminisce a little bit here about the night of the Forsberg transaction. We were in St. Louis at dinner with some sponsors, and my cell phone rings, and it's my buddy who used to work at Channel 2 here, now works for Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia, John Bork. Yeah. And he said, "I think you got him." I go, "You do?" "Yep. Forsberg was just announced as a scratch. I think it's done." So then we began churning, getting video sent to us from Nashville and so on. And, of course, we had mentioned Ryan Parrott before. He was part of that particular trade at that point in time. But you're right about the excitement at that point. And then when Kariya sets up Forsberg for the overtime goal against the Flyers, I guess the Red Wings, against the Red Wings, this place absolutely went berserk. I used to say ape something, but you get the idea.
That was my favorite night in the entire history of Rumorville for me, because it was the weirdest night, because that was the year that I was going to do the Sportsnet trade deadline show.
Okay.
And so Sportsnet had come to town to Philadelphia on that afternoon to film me doing some interviews beforehand. So I did some things with them. So all the Sportsnet people were there. Toronto was in town in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
All the Toronto media was there. And I was on this thing. I knew what was going on, and I had a good feeling for it, and I had good sources telling me what was going on. And I was the only person really that was saying that he was going to Nashville. Vancouver, the Rangers, all these other names were coming up. Montreal was coming up. And it got so crazy in the press box with people coming over to me that I had to leave the press box before the game. So, but just prior to that, I see Forsberg go out and take the warm-ups with the Flyers. Mm-hmm. And I talked to my source in Nashville. I'm like, he's taking the warm-ups. And the guy says to me, well, yeah, but, tell me if they announce him as a scratch. So I wrote out there, Forsberg might get scratched. When I wrote that, I had all these Toronto media people. I could hear them laughing at me, actually physically laughing at me. So at that point, I'm like, I got to get out of here. I go to my car I leave the building. I go to my car in the parking lot and sit in my car in the parking lot, and my buddy in the press box stays, and I'm making phone calls, and I was actually talking to the Nashville radio station. I went on the air with them, and then my buddy calls, and they just scratched Forsberg, and everybody in the press box is looking for you, and I wasn't anywhere to be found. People were freaking out.
That's when you were Elvis, because Elvis had left the building.
Exactly, and that was that, and that whole evening and just that whole experience, that was my favorite. To do that, to be able to break that rumor in front of the Toronto people, in front of the Sportsnet people, that was the stuff. That was the stuff.
Outstanding.
For me, so. That was a great night. That was a really great night. Well, Pete, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was really a thrill for me to have. I've been on your show several times. Josh, you got something?
Yeah, a couple things I wanted to give you guys a scoop on.
Okay.
David Desjardins apparently has said of the Prust hit, I thought it was a good hit. He set the tone for the game. So an interesting comment there by Desjardins. Also, James Neal tweeting out a couple minutes ago, or maybe it was an hour ago,
Okay.
In regards to all the rumors that are out there, because there were some rumors that were circulating that James Neal wanted out of Pittsburgh. He says, all these rumors couldn't be farther from the truth. I love being a Pittsburgh Penguin. I hope to remain a Penguin and win as a Penguin. And one final one for you guys. 35 years ago today, the New England Whalers officially changed their name to the Hartford Whalers.
And Chuck Caton moved from Madison, Wisconsin to Hartford, Connecticut. Actually, to Glastonbury, as I recall.
Two quick things. James Neal's got it all wrong. He doesn't want out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh wants him out of Pittsburgh. So I think that's what's going on. Plus, I've heard an interesting name as part of the mix for the Pittsburgh GM job. Somebody who's been a GM in the league in the past, somebody who's a really good guy, is Rick Dudley, assistant GM of the Canadiens. His name has popped up as a possible candidate for GM along with Paul Fenton, Pierre Maguire, and a number of other people for Pittsburgh. So we'll see what happens there.
And Paul Fenton has talked to Washington, too.
Yeah. And I can see Paul Fenton and Tom Fitzgerald, too. We've talked about him as well.
Yes.
Duds had the chance to be GM in Buffalo and didn't do it. That's what I wonder about. I wonder about that. I really think that I don't know that he wants to be a GM. If he wasn't going to take the Buffalo job, which is where he lives, I'm kind of surprised. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I mean, I'm a big Dudley fan, and I think he would be a great fit.
As am I. I'm a huge fan of Rick Dudley too.
Yeah, he's one of the best. Him and Talon are two guys I sort of put up on a pedestal in that way. As far as team building guys, so I would go with that anytime. So, where are you on Twitter, Pete? How can people follow you?
At Pete Weber Sports, exactly. And some people still think I'm the bowler. I had to correct a few last night, but
so you're not doing.
Yeah,
the
Pete, can you? No. Pete, are you appearing at Thruway Lanes tomorrow to show me how to convert the 7-10 split? No, I'm not doing that.
That would not be you. You're not the bowler, and you're not Shea Weber. You are indeed Pete Weber. No. Josh, what do you got?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, really quickly, a little bit of breaking news. Mark Bergevin of the Canadiens, Dean Lombardi of the Kings, and Bob Murray of the Ducks, all three finalists for the General Manager of the Year award.
And they'll all be fired 11 months from now.
It's an injustice that Garth Snow did not get nominated.
No, but I mean, the GM of the year last year was Ray Shiro. So, all right, let's. That's a good award to get. As I've said many times, Pete, but I wanted to say this to other folks as well out there. I grew up in Philly listening to Gene Hart. Gene Hart taught me how to love hockey, and when I was a kid, and 40 years ago, we talked about that. It was 40 years ago that I became a hockey fan. When the Flyers won their first Stanley Cup, I was 8 years old, and and since that point, and Gene Hart taught me everything I know, and I've always said that the most important person in a city besides the goalie is the television. Because honestly, it especially in a new city like Nashville, which isn't so much new anymore, but you've taught people this sport. There's people who never knew anything about the sport that you've taught, and what you've done, I put you right up there with Gene Hart, which to me is, as you know, that's big praise. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. But I have no relatives who have ever been on a horse jumping off a ramp into the water before. So
Right.
That's my difference.
And your daughter doesn't sing a national anthem anywhere.
No.
So there you go. But anyway, guys, thanks. We'll talk to you all. I think we're going to do a show on Monday. We weren't sure about that because it is Memorial Day, but I think we will do a show on Monday because there's a game Monday night, correct? There is.
Yes.
All right. So, so remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.